So we're going to continue the video here with solving these trig functions using square roots. On the first video we went through and we did kind of went through and solved using all of the different techniques. So we went where the logic came from, I guess. In this particular problem, we're going to go through and we're going to try to show you just how fast these problems actually can be. So I've got a secant squared. I want to take the square root of both sides. So the square root's going to cancel the squared, and I get secant theta equals, when I do a square root, I get a plus and a minus. That is the square root of 2. Now the square root of 2 isn't a very nice number, but that's okay. It's not that big a deal. And ultimately on this whole thing, I wouldn't want to leave this as a secant because I would need to plug it into my calculator, and I can't necessarily plug in secant super easy. So I'm going to turn that into cosine. When I turn it into cosine, all I'm doing is flipping over this fraction, so I get 1 over the square root of 2. When I was simplifying these or writing these trig functions before, I didn't want to leave that square root in the denominator, but now I'm just plugging it in the calculator, so it's not really that big a deal if I left it that way. So that's going to give me a reference angle. Now again, I have the plus and the minus, okay, which means that I need to decide where this reference angle is going to be. So cosine is the x values, where cosine is equal to positive. It is up here to the right and down here to the right. Okay, that's where cosine is equal to positive. This is the positive side for cosine. Now the negative side is going to be over here and over here. Okay, those are going to be the negatives. So that takes care of this plus minus. The number portion of it, we need to go in and we need to plug this into the calculator. So I'm going to do theta is equal to cosine inverse of 1 over the square root of 2. I'm just going to use the positive one. You could prove to yourself that the positive one and the negative one are going to come out to be the same. But ultimately, I can just plug that into the calculator. When I do that, I get that this reference angle is 45 degrees. And ultimately, again, because I had 4 of these positions, I'm going to end up with 4 different answers here. So my first one is going to be the actual reference angle. It's going to be this one right here. Okay, so that's 45 degrees. The second one is going to be this one that goes over here. That's 180 minus 45. Well, 180 minus 45 is 135. The third one is going to be this one that wraps all the way around here. That's going to be 180 plus 45. And then my last one is going to be the one that goes all the way around and comes back here. That's 360 minus 45, which is 315. Okay, and so then these are my 4 answers, the 4 angles that I can plug in to get. If I take the cosine of them, I will end up with a plus and minus the 1 over the square root of 2. If I take the secant of them, I'm going to end up with a plus and minus square root of 2. And if I take the secant squared of them, then I'm going to end up with a 2. These are the values that will happen at. So I'm going to take one step back here and take a look at 3. So those are that tangent problem that we had at the beginning and the secant squared problem here. Those are the problems that are going to follow through, get you through really the rest of this whole worksheet. I'm going to show you one other type of problem that we're going to encounter here with number 3. So when I take the square root and the squared cancel over here, so I get cosine theta equals plus and minus the square root of 1 is 1. Now if I look at that or think about that on my graph here, cosine is the x value, so cosine is equal to 1 out here, and cosine is equal to negative 1 out here. Okay, and so this value is 0 degrees, and this value is 180 degrees. Now if you're using your cheat sheet, then you're going to see that on that sheet in on the front side with the quadrants, the values show you when cosine is equal to 1 and cosine is equal to negative 1 at 0 and 180. If you plug this into your calculator, it's only going to give you one of those values though. Okay, so if I chose to do the cosine inverse of 1, it's going to give me the 0, and if I did the cosine inverse of -1, it gives me the 180. Okay, so it's all in there. There's no reference angle that happens here because this actually lands on the x-axis. So I end up with theta being equal to 0 degrees and 180 degrees. Okay, so just keep that in mind. These problems can end up on the x-axis or y-axis and so on. That will allow you to go through this. I'll jump to the back of the sheet to kind of run through one extra problem here. But I'll leave you with the fact that each of these problems that are on the back of this sheet are going to follow the same basic idea as the 3 that we've already gone over. All right, so let's take a look here at just number 11. For no particular reason, any one of these is going to work out just fine. So I've got number 11. I want to solve this as if this was 3x squared minus 5. So I want to add 5 to both sides. 3 tangent squared theta is equal to 8 plus 5. And then divide by 3. Tangent squared theta is equal to 13/3. Take the square root to get rid of the squared. So tangent theta is equal to plus and minus the square root of 13/3. Now, again, I wouldn't want to leave that if I were going through and I were simplifying this to name the tangent, but I'm not going through to try to name the tangent. I'm going through and trying to figure out what theta values I have. So if I'm plugging this in the calculator, I want to plug it in as tangent inverse. I'm going to use the positive one. Make sure that square root, I drew it kind of small, but make sure that when you plug it in, it's the square root of 13 divided by 3. So the whole thing, 13 divided by 3, is underneath that square root. When you do that, you end up with a reference angle here. Tangent is positive here and here, negative here and here, so I end up with 4 different problems. If you see a pattern here, when we are actually taking a square root and get a reference angle, we end up with 4 different answers here. So I get a reference angle of 64.34. Now if I'm thinking through this, I don't need to plug in the rest of these values in this picture, because they're all the reference angle is going to be 64.34. So the first one is the reference angle here. The second one is this one, which is 180 minus 64.34, or 115.66. I kind of ran out of room for the degree symbol there. The third one is this one, which is 180 plus that 64.34, which is 244.34. And then the final one is this one that goes all the way around, which is 360 minus that 64.34, which is 295.66 degrees. Okay, so I end up with these 4 answers again. When I do this problem, if you go through this whole worksheet, you're going to end up with 4 answers. That squared part gives you the positive side, which is 2 answers, and the negative side, which is 2 answers. So ultimately, you're going to end up with 4 different answers in each one of these problems. And go through, work through each one of these, and make sure you ask questions in class if you have them.